Over the top? No, we had no over the top rules. We were totally reasonable, thoughtful parents who made solid decisions at every turn.
We were totally reasonable, thoughtful parents who made solid decisions at every turn. In 1973, Harrison Ford and Paul Lamont did something to Ron Howard that haunts him today. They threw bottles at his car and locked him in a trailer, calling it Opie shaming. But that was just the beginning. For 50 years, Howard stayed quiet about the dark side of Hollywood. Now he's revealing everything. The accidents that nearly killed actors on his sets. The lawsuits that cost millions. The family secrets that almost tore his marriage apart. America's favorite director finally admits the truth about his painful journey. Ron Howard was born on March 1, 1954 in a small town called Duncan, Oklahoma. His dad, Rance, was trying to make it as an actor and writer. His mom, Jean, was also an actress. They didn't have much money. In fact, things were really tough. But in 1958, when Ron was just 4 years old, they packed everything they owned and moved to Hollywood. They were chasing a dream, hoping that both of them could get better acting jobs. It was risky. They had no guarantees. They ended up in a tiny home in Burbank trying to stay afloat while raising their little red-haired boy. The strange part was they lived close to a major studio. So, young Ron grew up seeing actors, cameras, and film sets almost every day. He didn't go to a normal preschool. Instead, he was taught on movie sets, watching everything and slowly becoming part of that world, even though no one had planned for it. That big move to California didn't just change where they lived, it quietly changed their whole future. On January 1, 1956, when Ron was just 18 months old, he appeared in a movie called Frontier Woman. It wasn't planned. His father needed a baby for one short scene and decided to use Ron. That tiny moment, just a baby crawling across a set, was the start of something huge. His parents were still struggling financially, especially because his dad had only just left the Air Force. By July 15, 1956, Ron was even performing live in a theater play. But even as he appeared more, his parents didn't want him to be treated like other child stars. They refused to sign any long-term contracts until he turned 5. That decision nearly destroyed them financially. In 1957, they were so broke that Rance thought about quitting acting and moving back to Oklahoma to be a farmer. But they stayed, barely hanging on, believing they were doing the right thing for their son. Starting in 1954, Ron's parents made one rule very clear. No full-time acting until he was at least 5. That meant turning down big offers in 1957 and 1958, even when they couldn't afford rent. They had to pawn things just to keep going. By the end of 1958, they were seriously thinking about leaving Hollywood, but they didn't. In 1959, Ron turned 5 and things slowly started changing. That year he was cast in a movie called The Journey. And for the first time, his name appeared in the credits, but it wasn't all happy. On set, other crew members made fun of his red hair and freckles. They called him names like freckle-faced freak. It broke his heart. His dad, who was also working in the set, got into an argument with one of the crew and almost lost his job. The job only paid $12,500, but it meant everything to them. That same year, his younger brother, Clint, was born on April 20th. Money was still tight. Their debt reached the modern-day value of about $5,000, but his parents stayed firm on protecting Ron. They kept him in public school. They let him be a kid as much as they could, even as the pressure grew. Then in 1960, something huge happened. Ron landed the role of Opie Taylor in The Andy Griffith Show. He was just 6 years old. The casting process was long and hard. More than 300 kids auditioned, but Ron's natural charm stood out. The show began airing on October 3, 1960, and it became a hit. It ran for 249 episodes, and Ron was in 243 of them. At the start, he was paid $300 per episode. By the time the show ended in 1968, he was making $1,000 an episode. But with that success came a lot of pressure. He was still only a child, yet he had to memorize lines, show up on time, and perform perfectly. There was no live audience, so every joke and scene had to be delivered with exact timing. It wasn't easy, but hell learned fast. The show felt like it took place in a simpler time, and Ron's character made people feel safe and warm. That's why viewers loved him. But behind the scenes, he was growing up fast. Ron and Andy Griffith, the star of the show, became very close. Andy was more than just a co-star. He acted like a mentor. He would explain scenes to Ron and tell him stories between takes. Their bond started when Ron was just 6, and it grew stronger over time. But things weren't always calm. Andy struggled with drinking, and sometimes Ron saw him get into angry arguments on set. It was scary. In one case, Andy read a bad review out loud and became upset in front of everyone. Despite all this, he was still kind to Ron, helping him with emotional scenes and treating him with respect. Years later, in 1997, Andy even visited Ron on a movie set in Queens. They didn't find out until after Andy died in 2012 that they were actually distant cousins. It was a shocking and sweet discovery that made their long bond feel even more special. In 1962, during a scene on a lake, 8-year-old Ron nearly drowned. They were filming a fishing scene on a small boat when something went wrong. The boat tipped and Ron fell into the water. Andy Griffith saw it happen and jumped in without a second thought. He pulled Ron out. The producers didn't want anyone to know because it could damage the show's reputation, so it stayed quiet. But Ron never forgot it. There were no safety rules back then. Kids could work long hours, and accidents weren't uncommon. That near drowning left a mark on Ron. And years later, when he started directing films, he made sure every set had safety plans in place. By 1968, when the Andy Griffith Show ended, Ron was 14. But instead of getting more roles, he got rejected. Over 50 auditions in 1968 and 1969 went nowhere. Everyone still saw him as Opie. He felt trapped. He told his parents he wanted to quit. He took small roles like Gentle Ben in 1969 for just $500 per episode, far less than what he used to earn. In 1970, he lost the lead in The Wild Country. Things kept getting worse. He joined the Smith family in 1971, earning $8,000 for 39 episodes. But the show flopped. All this rejection gave him anxiety, which he hid from others. At the same time, he was playing basketball in high school, averaging 12 points per game. In 1972, he tried to live a normal teen life, but inside he felt stuck. In 1973, things changed again. Ron was 19 and got cast in American Graffiti. It was directed by George Lucas. Filming started in June in California. On the outside, it looked exciting, but behind the scenes, things were rough. Co-stars Harrison Ford and Paul Lammett bullied him. On July 15, they threw beer bottles near his car and yelled at him to dance, "Opie, dance." They locked him in a trailer on July 20, making him miss rehearsals. They even spiked his drinks. All of it was because he had been a child star, and they didn't respect that. Ron stayed quiet. He later called it his only moment of Opie shaming. Despite everything, he made Ithro and earned $10,000. Years later, Ford apologized. But the pain stuck with him. Back in 1970, Ron had met Cheryl Alley in high school. Their first date was on November 1, and by December, a rumor spread that Cheryl was pregnant. They were just 16. The gossip exploded. In January 1971, Florida, Howard received a death threat from an angry extra named Harold Jenkins. On February 12, Jenkins, who had been fired, sent letters threatening violence. He felt the film mocked the elderly. Fox had to hire 24-hour security for $150,000. The script was softened and release was delayed until June 21. The film still made $85 million and won Oscars for Donamesh in visual effects. In 1988, Willow came out on May 20. George Lucas had come up with the idea in 1972 and Howard directed it with a $35 million budget. It made $137.6 million globally, but still lost $20 million due to massive marketing and lukewarm reviews. Lucas and Howard clashed constantly. In June 1987, they argued over $5 million in cuts. Howard nearly quit. Home video later helped it break even. In 1989, Howard released Parenthood on August 2. It was inspired by a chaotic trip to Australia with his 4-year-old daughter, who threw up sushi on him mid-flight. The film cost $20 million and made $126 million. But in May 1989, writer Elena Vasquez sued Howard, claiming he stole her script. He paid $500,000 to settle in June. The case almost stopped the film's release. In 1991, Howard directed Backdraft, a firefighter drama. On July 23, 1990, a stunt went wrong. A massive fire broke out, burning Kurt Russell's hand and face. An OSHA investigation found serious safety violations. 3 other crew members were also burned. Howard later said they never knew when the fire would turn on them. Still, the movie earned $152 million and got an Oscar nomination for visual effects. In 1995, Apollo 13 came out on June 30. It made $355 million worldwide, but filming was rough. Tom Hanks demanded accuracy down to exact NASA transcripts. On October 12, 1994, he insisted on script rewrites. By October 15, the entire production shut down, costing $2 million. Howard threatened to quit on October 18. NASA staff had to mediate. The film later won Oscars for editing and sound in 1996. In 1996, Ransom came out on November 8, making $309 million. But while